It's really niche, but...
Hello, Cold Harbor Supply. How can I help you today?
Hey, Ryan. I'm just looking online for my first set of binos, and I'm just kind of overwhelmed, and I'm just hoping to get some advice from you guys, just what you personally use. What would you guys recommend me to look at?
So what I personally use is actually going to be something that I think it's kind of underrated. So it might not be everybody's cup of tea. It's going to be the AB Night Vision RPNVG, which is a fixed bridge goggle. It stands for ruggedized panning. Yeah.
It's fixed bridge?
Yeah. So it's a fixed bridge goggle, stands for ruggedized panning night vision goggle. It's got a lot of great features.
I've been reading a lot, and people are telling me that I really shouldn't be looking for like a fixed bridge goggle in 2024 at this point.
I think it's one of the more compelling options on the market.
Well, I usually just post photos on Instagram of them anyway, so I might just get the coolest looking ones.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, is there anything you have in mind?
You're that guy on YouTube? I watch your videos a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Great job,
Yeah, I'm that guy. Yeah, I appreciate that, man.
Thanks a lot for your help, dude. I really appreciate your input.
Okay. So have you decided on what goggles you're gonna get?
I think I'll go for the JR31.
All right. Well, yeah, you can find that on our website. I appreciate it, man. Anything else I can help you with?
No, that's good, man. You look for my order.
Oh, okay. All right. You have a great day, man.
See you, dude.
Yep. Bye. Well, that was a bit of an interesting intro and a little different than what we normally do, and it's totally not indicative of the everyday happenings at the CHS office. But let's get into the meat of this video. So today I want to talk about my personal goggle and one of my favorites here, and that's going to be the RPNVG by AB Night Vision. I think this is one of the most underrated goggles currently on the market, and today we're here to talk about why you should really consider this goggle or your next binocular purchase. So let's get into it. So who is AB Night Vision? Well, AB Night Vision is a legendary manufacturer of housings in the night vision industry. They are based in the US, and they've been making night vision goggles for quite a while now, and all of their goggles are going to start with the word ruggedized. Their goggles cover everything from articulating to panning, like this one we're going to talk about today, and they're all going to be made of 70-75 aluminum, and they're going to be made in the US. So if you guys are going to be looking for a goggle for the end of the world, it's pretty hard not to recommend any of AB's products. Now, this goggle isn't new to the market, so I don't really want to go over the specifications and all that stuff because there's a lot of videos that do that already. But if you are curious, I'm going to put them like right here, and you can just like pause the video so that you can see them. They're going to be right there. So I do have access to pretty much every goggle on the market right now, and I've been using these guys for about a year and a bit as my personal goggle. And through that use, I've kind of determined this goggle fits my needs really well. So we're going to get into why. So we're going to go over the features of this goggle, front to back, and the little adjustments I've made to make this goggle my own. So first off, the killer app on these goggles is going to be the fact that they pan out. So if you were to use standard mil-spec or RPO lenses, you start up with a 40-degree field of view when they're in a standard binocular configuration, but when you pan these guys out, you get around 65 degrees field of view with standard mil-spec lenses, which is quite a bit more than your standard binos or monos. So how do these guys actually feel to use when they are panned out? Just to preface this, I'm going to say it's very hard to show this on camera. Throughout this, we're probably going to be overlaying some footage that we've spliced together, as well as some pictures to show you guys what it looks like. But I will say that most people that I've shown this in person to have always found it actually pretty intuitive, especially in contrast with how goofy it kind of looks like when it's in this configuration.
Oh yeah, you know what it looks like? It's literally like what a fucking 18 looks like, just light. It's like the light version of a fucking 18. Like the way that it like kind of puts them together, but it's on a huge angle.
Oh no!
Holy shit! It's even better.
Oh my god!
Really?
It's huge.
And you see now why when I saw these, I was like, all I want is more field.
Really?
Like wow, like just having it like
Isn't that
at
crazy?
the usual length I would have. I can see
You can see every detail.
elbow width is the best way to put it. Like everything from my elbows out, I can see because traditionally with nods you just see from basically the plane, the just what your eye like what the side of your head would see is all you see. Where with this, it's like I can see everything from my shoulders out, and that's not pressed right up against my eyes. That's
Who's got
at the distance that I would usually keep
NVG
mods at.
tubes?
This is the future right here. That's something.
And why would you get this over
This isn't a 14?
Price.
and
I love the dudes at CHS.
weight too though, right?
Oh no, yeah, no, that's like because I mean it's essentially RNVGs,
Since high school.
but you're able to get the Coke Zero version of panos.
So when you use a normal binocular, you're actually going to see one big circle, whereas when you use a pan system, it's going to look like a figure eight or a Venn diagram, and then your brain kind of combines the two images together. This is also why having these goggles properly built by an experienced builder is really important. You can get away with having an improperly collimated goggle on a bino setup. With these guys, if they're not properly collimated, they're basically unusable because your horizons are going to be wildly off and you cannot look through them at all. It's extremely nausea-inducing. These goggles, when you pan them out, there's actually a huge degree of amount that you can pan them. So you can have them full 90 like this, which is just like a conventional goggle. You can have them a little bit out, which is easier to use, although you won't see as much field of view. You'll just have more overlap, which makes the image a little bit easier to resolve. I most often run them all the way out when I'm doing stuff like driving, biking, anything requiring a lot of movement in a vehicle. And I find them really useful for hiking too, so I can see the most of my surroundings. And of course, if I'm doing anything indoor related, having them panned out like this is super useful for seeing the most I can in a confined space. So in terms of shooting through a pan night vision goggle, I actually don't find it as hard as people say, especially you put in a bit of time to it. So I'm just going to show you kind of how I do it on the table. It's not going to be the best representation. But once I get these adjusted to my eye, it's actually not too hard to look through an optic with it, although it might seem kind of weird. I recommend using an optic with a bigger window, such as an EOTech, Holosun Ames. If you're using a pistol, it's actually pretty easy because you just got to turn your head a little bit. And if I'm looking through this with the pan setup, all I need to do is turn my head slightly, and the dot's right there, and it's super easy to shoot passively with it like any other binocular system. Of course, if you're going to be using something like a laser illuminator, having the goggles pan doesn't actually affect that usage at all if you're going to be using active aiming. So in terms of eye relief for these things, obviously I'm running boom slang, so the eye relief is a little bit shorter. However, with the proper mount setup, I'm actually able to suck these almost all the way into my eyes. And when you do run pan goggles, you will need to have them a little bit closer to your eye to get a bit more of an ideal image. However, I have used these guys with gas masks before. So I have here an Avon FM53, which is a very popular gas mask, especially amongst any Western forces. And as you can hear my Bane VP going off here, I can still see through them, no problem. Mind the feedback here, sorry about that. I gotta clean my mic a little bit better. But I can still see through these goggles, no problem, and they're still totally usable. And I don't find that the eye protection is going to be a limiting factor when you're using painted goggles. So we're going to move back on to the features of the housing now that we've talked about, the panning setup. And the housing itself is going to be really well designed and actually very feature rich. So on the bottom, you can see here is the battery pod. This guy uses a single Sierra 123A. You get about 15 to 20 hours of battery life on a single battery, depending on your ambient conditions and all that stuff. So plenty of time. If you do want to use an external battery pack, such as a 31 style battery pack, Anvis pack, even AB has their own night vision battery packs, you totally can with that. It takes a Anvis style cable on this side over here, and that just sticks out, and then you get like 80 hours of battery life if you use a battery pack. I will say that the placement of the port for this goggle is a little strange. If you don't have a right 90-degree bend cable, or if you don't have a cable that has an accommodation for that, it can stick out quite far. So you do want to make sure that you get the right cable. I believe we have one that has an enclosure for that bend. That way it is as low profile as possible. Moving on to the IPD adjustment system. So IPD is basically, I've explained this in the panning part, how far the tubes are going to be set because everybody's got different shaped faces. Some of you guys got Pinhead Larry sized faces, and some of you guys are looking like Sid the Sloth, and this goggle can pretty much accommodate all different sizes. The way that this one works for that quick adjust, because you're going to do that when you're panning, is you basically press this button over here, you slide the tube out, and then you can slide it in, and it's super fast. There's lots of little detents on there. You can set this for any eye distance you'd like. I've never found that to be a problem. A super detail-oriented design feature of the RNVG and RPNVG that I have not seen anybody online or on YouTube talk about is the fact that you can actually adjust the tension of the tubes on the bridge to make sure that you don't get any wobble on the bridge, and so you can adjust how easily or how difficult it slides in or out. And that's done via these two grub screws here at the front of the bridge. These are nylon tipped screws. So if you find that the pod is really wobbly or you find that it's too easy to adjust, you simply can turn these just a little bit to tighten it right up. If you turn them really hard, you basically turn this thing into a non-adjustable goggle. So I wouldn't recommend that. But that's something that I haven't seen mentioned, and it's actually the same thing on the standard RNVG as well, except it only has one on the rear. So each pod of the goggle is going to be individually purged via a purge screw over here. I'm going to get into why that's a bit more important later on when we talk about modularity. But we're going to go to the bridge now. So the bridge over here just basically holds the pods in place, and it's where your controls and your illuminator are going to be. So this thing does come with an illuminator. It's actually a very powerful illuminator. I was a bit skeptical of illuminators on housings up until kind of recently when I got a bit more into urban exploring. And I found in those buildings where you have zero light, it doesn't matter how good your tubes are. L3 super gain, 4G high gain, didn't matter. You can't see anything at all. So having an illuminator in my goggle was really helpful. I have seen some people put a PVS 7 focuser on this illuminator. If I can easily get one, I totally would put that on. But right now I'm rocking a little force on force shield from our friends at Mark IV Designs. Having sims and airsoft rounds fly into your goggles is not exactly fun. There's a little shield on that. So the buttons over here, and this gets into the age-old debate of buttons versus knobs. And a lot of people prefer knobs for good reason. Knobs, like on this RNVG, are very tactile. You can feel when the goggle is on or off. And the most important thing about that, I find, is when you flip the goggle up on your head and you're not sure if the goggle is on or off, you can use the knob and you can feel physically if that switch is in the on or off position, which will save your tubes from any potential light damage. Buttons do have their advantages as well. If you guys look up images of broken PVS 14 knobs on Google, you'll probably find a lot. I haven't seen it happen with the RNVG particularly, but knobs do stick out. They are a snag, and yes, they can get broken. Buttons, on the other hand, are a lot more flush. You don't have to worry about that as much as with knobs. So the big advantage of buttons is just going to be lower profile, less weight, more flush controls. However, they are less tactile on average. So you might have a hard time telling it's on or off unless you drop the goggle in front of your eyes and check. What I find different about the RPNVG buttons is you can actually tell whether the nod is on or off, even if it's flipped up, because the rubber housing surrounding the button doesn't depress the same way as the button internally does. If you press down on the button, you can feel there's a bit of a void between the rubber and the actual button itself, which allows you to tell if the goggle is on or off or not really quickly. If I were to have the goggles be in their off position, now that void is completely filled and the goggle is off. I've actually had this save my goggle a few times in the past before where I flipped them up doing something quick and I checked with my finger and it allowed me to basically tell what power state my goggle was in. It was just very easy to flip them on or off. So now on to something that is really unique to this goggle that I don't think really many goggles do, and that's going to be modularity. So yes, you can split this goggle into monos, and I'm going to show you how to do that. What makes this nod a little bit different from other modular night vision devices is that it's pretty much toolless in its disassembly, and you don't lose collimation or purge when you decide to split this off into two monos. So first off, you're probably going to need a tool like a screwdriver of some sort, I have the wrong bit in here, to loosen the retaining tabs on the side. So there's these little tabs on the side that retain the pods in place, so if you slide the pods all the way out, they don't fall on the floor, which would be very bad. But these guys, you don't have to take them all the way, you can simply loosen them. And you might notice inside here, there's a little orange O-ring, and this basically acts as a spring. So you don't need to loosen all the way. And once you have that loosened up, you can basically just pull out a little bit and then turn the tab all the way up. And now this pod comes fully free. So you can see this is basically now your monocular device, but you will need to get separate mono adapters. This is totally contained. The top of the pod where the contacts are podded, so you don't have to worry about this losing any waterproofing or any purge or any seal at all. The monocular adapters look like this guy over here, and they basically turn each pod of your RPNVG into a auto gain PVS 14 that's actually a little bit nicer and more durable in some ways because it's aluminum versus plastic. And it will use a single CR123 in here, which will give you about 50 or so hours of battery life on a single battery. There are going to be side unique. So the right pod is for the right tube and the left pod is going to be for the left tube. And additionally, you won't actually need both of them to use this as a double monocular setup. You only need one to use for a mono because this on the bridge itself is going to work perfectly fine as a monocular goggle. You just have to make sure that you know which side monocular adapter you're getting in the future, so that way if you're more of a right-handed user, you can just give the left mono to another person and they can just swing the bridge out of the way. So just remember what side you want to use personally for the bridge, and then you can just get any side mono that you want for the adapter. So I have the right-sided monocular here, and it's very easy to put together. Each of the monocular adapters is going to be labeled L and R. I just leave the battery in them, honestly, because there's no tube connected in it. What you're going to do is you basically line the rails up like this. You're going to squeeze the IPD stop, and then you're going to attach the goggle, and now this is pretty solidly attached. If you want a little bit of extra security, you can rotate this locking tab over here, and now this goggle will not come apart under any circumstances at all. This functions almost exactly like a PVS 14. It has a knob for on and off. It's a very, very tactile knob. This guy also has a lanyard retention point, standard quarter 20, so you can put any kind of monocular mount you want on it. In this case, we have our Raj on the left side adapter, and it comes with an illuminator as well. So to use the illuminator, all you're going to do is twist, pull, turn, and it's going to lock, and now your illuminator is on. So you actually get a very feature-rich mono with this device. For me, I don't really talk to girls, so I don't actually need to split this too often for that. However, I find it really useful because I'm into doing night vision photography and media like I'm doing right now. And sometimes when I'm on the field, I bring this goggle with me, I bring one of the side adapters with me, and I simply just leave this one on my head, and I bring this out, and now I can have this screw onto my camera. Boom. And now I have a pretty cool night vision recording device, and I still have a night vision device that I can see in the dark with. So as I said in the beginning of this video, this, I believe, is a really underrated goggle. And I think the big reason why this isn't more popular than it deserves to be is first off going to be the fact that it's a bit more premium, it's more costly, but I do believe that reflects in the features and the construction and the build quality of the goggle. I also think it's not more popular because it's a costly goggle and it's a fixed bridge goggle. So what's kind of more in vogue right now is going to be articulating goggles. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I've talked about this in previous videos, but I want to drive the point home here. There are going to be advantages and disadvantages for both articulating and fixed bridge goggles. Articulating, you're obviously going to have the ease of use advantage. It's very easy to roll these pods out of the way, to check your ambient lighting conditions, and it's super easy to roll these pods out of the way for really easy low profile stowage. If you guys are using this in vehicles or in really low ceiling environments where if you have the goggle sticking up like this, you're not really going to be able to sit in that vehicle, then yeah, running them splayed out like this and then being in the vehicle is going to be a lot easier. However, articulating goggles do have some downsides as well. Articulating goggles are typically going to be a little bit less durable than fixed bridge goggles. Of course, I do think this will withstand any realistic use, but I know a lot of you guys are going after something that'll last you, like I said, till the end of the world, and something that is bomb-proof, and it's going to be pretty hard to beat that mechanical fixed bridge advantage. This guy has aluminum pods sitting on an aluminum bridge that's basically clamped into that bridge. Unless you throw this with enough force to permanently damage the tubes on the inside of your goggles, there is pretty much no chance that this is going to break. I found that the fixed bridge system was a bit more dialed in compared to a lot of articulating systems, even though it did come with some pretty interesting user considerations. I found some ways to overcome these, however, and this is going to get into how I made this goggle work for me. So first off, articulating goggles typically are going to be a little bit lighter than fixed bridge goggles. The RPNVG is a bit of a chunky beast. It's one of the heavier goggles in the market, weighing at just over 600 grams if you're using these with standard mil-spec lenses, and it weighs less than that when you're using lightweight lenses. I'm using boom slangs. This reduces the weight by about 30% or so. I'm going to put the numbers up here. And Steve is using, I believe these are RPO 2.0s, and this reduces the weight by quite a lot. So if you are using a heavy goggle system, I recommend going with lighter lenses to save some weight off the top, and you can pick lenses that have the optical qualities that you want. RPOs are going to be very similar to mil-spec lenses and optical quality, and boom slangs are going to give you that nice wider field of view, both of which are lighter than mil-spec lenses. The second thing is checking for ambient lighting conditions. So like I said earlier, it's very easy to do that with articulating goggles because you can just flip the goggle up and down and go to town there. I don't actually find that super useful when I'm on the field because it kind of wastes time. If I'm going to be shooting or having something in front of my face, or if I'm doing something, I don't really want to compromise my binocular night vision in order to check the ambient lighting conditions. And checking ambient lighting conditions is really important because you can have a flashlight shining on you and you wouldn't know if it's an IR or a white light unless you practice and check the ambient lighting conditions. So there's two ways that I accomplish this with my setup. First off is I'm going to do the thing where you just look up like this, and then you can kind of see what's going on, and then you can look back into your nods. And that doesn't require you to take your hands off anything. You can just look up and then look down. Another thing is I've overcome a lot of the downsides of fixed bridge goggles with this Cadex mount here because it's really optimized for any fixed bridge setup. So if I do want to get a better view, the Cadex mount has a cool force to overcome up feature. So I just put the goggles up like this. I don't need to press any buttons. It's just spring loaded. And then they just spring back down and lock in place with a pretty stiff force to overcome. So just do this, look around, see what I need to see, and then put the goggles back in my eyes for a full bino experience. Additionally, I've actually used these goggles in a helicopter situation before where there was a low ceiling. And what I did is I couldn't roll the tubes up, so it was a little bit more uncomfortable for me. But I basically ran these goggles all the way out until they hit their most farthest position. And then I used the height adjustment to move the goggles up. And now basically the tubes are rolled up. Yes, they're not rolled up individually, so I can't see through the nons, but now they're parallel with my helmet. I'm able to be in a vehicle, no problem, and I can see under them with no issues. But that still doesn't really solve one thing, and that's going to be stowage. Fixed bridge goggles are going to stow a lot higher than articulating goggles. There's no real way around that, and this is probably going to be the largest downside to using a fixed bridge setup. I did try to minimize that as much as I could with my goggle, which is why you might have noticed that the dovetail looks a little bit different on my goggle than it does a stock RPNVG. The stock RPNVG uses this higher and more kickback dovetail, and I believe this was done for Wilcox mounts because Wilcox mounts, they don't have as much rearward travel as a Cadex or a Naruto's low stow mount. So they do need to be kicked back a little bit farther to get an ideal eye box because the eye box for pan goggles is going to be a little bit more sensitive. However, when I used a Cadex mount, I found that this kickback was pretty much unnecessary. It just made the goggle sit a lot taller when it was stowed up, and it made it sit a lot lower when it was deployed. AB goggles, from what I can tell, all use the same dovetail interface system. So you can take this dovetail off and replace it with a standard AB RNVG dovetail. For me, this setup works a lot better, reduces the perceived weight of the goggle because it's closer to my head, and I have more room of adjustment with my Cadex, allowing me to run this all the way out. So if I was running this with a gas mask, which I have done before, I can run my goggles all the way out and my lenses aren't bumping into me. We will have standard dovetails out on our site very soon if they're not out already. So that's the way I kind of customized my goggle to get over some of the limitations. For weight, I made my lenses use lightweight lenses, and so did Steve. For profile, I used a standard flatter dovetail. And then to optimize the manipulations of the goggle while I was on my head, I used the Cadex mount to overcome the fact that the tubes don't roll off. So yes, you can get over some of those limitations with a bit of practice and with the right setup. So these things equipped with boom slangs can get you almost the field of view as a GPNVG, which I believe is 97 degrees, 80 versus 97. Doesn't seem like that much of a difference, right? So are these things the quad killer? Well, obviously not, especially not on Instagram because, you seem to post a picture of quads and everybody goes goo goo gaga for them. But I do think these things are an interesting alternative to quads, especially when you factor in other things like weight and obviously price. So quads are going to just weigh a lot more than even these at their heaviest configuration. These with stock mil-spec lenses, I believe, are going to weigh just over 600 grams, and quads are going to weigh almost 700 to 800 grams, no matter what setup you get. So automatically, that's going to be saving your neck, and that's going to be saving you a lot of weight. In terms of cost, I've looked on a few websites, including ones that sell like clone GPNVGs. Even at their lowest cost. So you're getting a pair of clone GPNVGs, some NNVT tubes, so very, very entry-level tubes, the same, I believe, as our starter nods. And those are going to cost around $15,000, $16,000 or so Canadian. So that's already a lot of money. If you want to spend that amount of money just to get very entry-level performing tubes, you know, I can't tell you how to spend your cash, but in my opinion, that's not exactly going to be the best price to performance ratio. Conversely, you can get this setup with 4G high gain tubes or any sort of 2000 plus FOM tube for around that same cost. And if you were to go with more entry level tubes such as Photonis Echoes or even NNVTs, you drop that cost significantly. So is this the quad killer? I'm going to say obviously not. However, when you look at balancing out weight, price, FOM/performance, these things provide a really attractive alternative opinion for those of you guys that are not using Uncle Sam's or the Crown's money to get your nods, and you want something that's very usable, high spec, and that has a very competitive field of view. So, is the RPNVG going to be your next goggle? And I think even after this whole video, it's going to be a little bit of a hard sell to people. However, if you are a power user, you're primarily going to be running the goggle in front of your eyes. You want an awesome experience with them panned. You want to be able to take it off and use it modularly. And in my opinion, the best way that the industry has to offer currently, well, I think the RPNVG does fill those roles excellently, which is why I use it as my personal goggle, even after trying out so many goggles. So that's it for this video, everybody. RPNVG, a little something for you guys to bite on during this holiday season. Stay safe out there, everybody. Happy holidays, have a happy new year, and we will see you on the next one. RPNVG, my favorite goggles. And yes, I do look weird using them.